In Inglis vs. Trustees of Sailors Snug Harbor, 28 U.S. 99, 1830, the United States Supreme Court held that individuals born in the American colonies before the Declaration of Independence could remain British subjects if they demonstrated an intent to adhere to the British Crown rather than becoming American citizens. The court, as discussed in 8 FAM 102.3 from the United States Department of State, ruled that remaining in New York under British protection during the Revolutionary War or departing with them showed this intent. Key details regarding intent to remain a British subject in this case. Significance of departure. A person born in the colonies who left before the Declaration of Independence or immediately after and never returned was deemed to have elected to remain a British subject. Role of infancy. If an individual was an infant during the conflict, their citizenship followed that of their father. If the father left and acted as a British subject, the child held that status unless the child formally disaffirmed it upon reaching maturity. The Antonati Rule. The court distinguished between those born before Antonati and after the separation, focusing heavily on whether individuals explicitly withdrew from the new states to continue allegiance to the king. Application to John Inglis. The court was tasked with determining if John Inglis' father, Charles Inglis, maintained British allegiance, which would make John an alien unable to inherit property in New York. This case is foundational for understanding the transition of citizenship during the American Revolution. So, as we can see from what we just read, the United States Supreme Court stated that if your intent was to stay a British subject as a descendant of the British or those who were British subjects in the colonies prior to the American Revolution, then you can stay underneath that subjectivity as long as your intent is to maintain your allegiance to the king or the crown. Now, why this is important is because it said that you had to trace it through your father line, your father's side. We know in America, they severed the tie from the father via partu sequitur videntrem. As we can see that there was a reason why they wanted to keep the man or the father away, because it would tie you back to the crown. But if you're not tied to the crown, you will be underneath the warship status, underneath the jurisdiction who's now occupying that territory. And in this case, this would be the United States. So from what I'm being shown you, brothers and sisters, this is prophecy. I'm trying to bring it to your awareness that is your intent, and you must maintain your allegiance for you to have those rights, your inheritance reinstituted to you, which is actually perpetual by you being underneath the status and allegiance of he or those or the kingdom that gave it to you. And in this case, they're talking about the British, but what I'm speaking about is us as English. So as long as our intent is to maintain our allegiance to the English king, we traced our genealogy going back to people who had their allegiance to the English king, to the English monarch. And we're making sure that we're doing that in our full being. Then by law, you are still underneath that. Now, if you don't know who your king is, the English king is, that's something you must understand. You must do the work until to accept, because we know who our English king is. But it's now your job to be able to accept him as being the English king. Otherwise, you are underneath the subjectivity of either the United States, or you're going to be a British subject, but you have to prove that, and the king or the British king must accept you as you've been in allegiance of his subjectivity. With that being said, peace. This is a United States Supreme Court case versus Wong Kim Ark, and it's dealing with citizenship. And this is a snippet that was referenced within that Supreme Court case. And it says, the Supreme Court of North Carolina, speaking by Mr. Justice Gaston, said, before our revolution, all free persons born within the dominions of the King of Great Britain, whatever their color or complexion, were native-born British subjects. Those born out of his allegiance were aliens. So this goes to show you, brothers and sisters, that prior to 1783, all of you were British subjects. Your genealogy at this time will tie you all to be subjects of Great Britain. That's why we say at least backtrack yourself into the 1700s during the time of when you can see with proof through law that you, as well as your ancestors, were be or are still subjects of Great Britain. And from the case that I just showed you with the English verse trustees of Sailor Snug, that you must have your intent and you must maintain your intent throughout everything that you do in regard of you maintaining your subjectivity or your allegiance to the King of England, or in this case, they're talking about the British king. But either way, how you try to slice and dice it, it's explaining the same requirements. So for those of you so for those of you who had no idea, yes, your ancestors were underneath the King of Great Britain as subjects, native-born subjects. Your genealogy will prove it, the law has proven it, and history will prove it. Only thing that's left now is what do you decide to be? You continue to be an American, you either be a British subject, or you go back and be an English subject. And with all three of those, your intent must show via your actions and your deeds, and your action and deeds must be in alignment in regards to what those people believed in and how they operated. And as we can see today, many of you have a hard time in keeping up the order, keeping up structure, and keeping up the ways and traditions of specific people. And this is why they're showing you that you cannot be them, you cannot inherit, and you will not receive what you think that is supposed to be yours if you do not come back in the image of those who you descend from. So with that being said, pay attention because the law sticks and it's not moving for none of you. Peace.